Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we have another of these really cool Sega Jurassic World Dominion figures to take a look at. We recently have reviewed the Giganotosaurus, well now we are checking out Velociraptor Beta. And I feel like there aren't very many good Velociraptor Beta figures out, and even the ones that have decent sculpts most often have really bad paint apps. But this one looks to be another kind of case of a pretty nice looking sculpt with not so great paint apps. However, at the same time, that's kind of what we've come to expect when it comes to these Sega figures, because the Sega figures usually have really beautiful, really quite screen-accurate sculpts, but they usually have fairly lackluster, really basic paint jobs, and that's definitely what we see here from the image on the box of the Velociraptor Beta figure, but also kind of what we saw with the Giganotosaurus. Even though the Giga's paint looked good, it could have used more to make it look a little bit better, especially for how high quality the sculpts here are. But as far as the box art goes, you can see it's pretty much your standard when it comes to this type of figure. It looks very similar to what we had seen on the Giganotosaurus box. Over here on the side, you can see a sneak peek of the Beta figure. And then over here, we actually have Velociraptor Blue. Even though it says Beta, that is blue. And then up on the top, basically it just says Beta. And then here on the back, you can kind of see like some assembly because you see the tail's disconnected. You have to put the tail on and then put it onto the base. So let's pop this out of the box and check it out. So here is our base this time around. We have a nice little rocky area here. And you can also see again Jurassic World Dominion, the logo right there. And then we've got our Velociraptor Beta figure, and it is a really nice looking sculpt as far as Beta goes. Easily the best that I personally have seen so far. I think the sculpt is honestly phenomenal, especially as far as the fine detail goes, but I actually quite like the pose and everything for it too, because I think it's just a pretty cool looking, fairly unique looking pose for Beta, as Beta's kind of coming down off of a ledge. Let me see if I can figure out the pegs here. Since I'm behind the camera, it's a little hard to find them. There we go. Now we've got our little Beta figure here on the base, looking pretty cool. Definitely looks nice. Again, I love the pose of this. You can see it's basically just Beta running over that little rocky terrain, looking like it's coming in potentially for a kill. Reminds me of the way that Beta looks right as it's running in to take down, I believe it was a wolf potentially that grabbed the rabbit in Dominion. I forget exactly because it's been a little bit since I had watched it, but it kind of has that pose where Beta's running in with its hands open and the mouth open, ready to attack. But very cool looking so far, so let's jump to a closer look and get a better idea of how nice the fine detail is. So starting up here at the head sculpt of Velociraptor Beta, you can see that the skin texture and everything looks really nice here on the face. Quite a bit of really beautiful, really vibrant skin texture, scale, detail here in the face of Beta. You can see the eye is painted pretty nicely. We have a yellow with a nice slit-like black pupil. You've got a little bit of creasing there under the eye. Nicely sculpted out nostrils. You can see the mouth is sculpted in an open position, and the teeth are all sculpted fairly nicely, although they're all sculpted together rather than individually, but they still look okay. You've got some nice detailing there on the inside of the mouth there, on the skin flap right there on the side with the nice pinkish tone that we have there. Nice realistic looking pinkish tone on the inside of the mouth. You also have a nicely sculpted out tongue in there. Everything detail wise looks pretty good. Even the inside of the mouth, like look at that. That's actually quite phenomenal looking in there as far as the detailing goes. But as you start to lead back here into the neck, there is a fairly obvious seam here where the head has connected to the body. I didn't connect it there. That's just the way it comes. It's already pre-connected in that area, but the seam is quite noticeable. Same for the lower jaw, which is a little downside, but not really a big one. If you were going to like repaint this or something like that, a little putty could absolutely seal that right up. You can see some nice looking skin texture and skin stretching here on the lower jaw and the throat region. The skin of the throat kind of sticking down right there. Nice scale detail and creasing as you move down the course of the neck. We start to see the blue stripe pick up, and it's also outlined with that white or light grayish tone. But it's definitely not the best stripe in the world, that's for sure. I think the tone of gray that they've used is pretty good for this Beta figure, but the actual blue itself looks pretty sloppy. You can see some osteoderms running down the course of the neck right there, very similar to Velociraptor Blue, since Beta is almost like a direct copy of Blue. You can see, again, as we move down, more really nice, really vibrant scale detail through the entire figure. There's a pretty nice arm sculpt here. You do have some muscle definition sculpted out in it, but it's not super defined, which is actually nice to see. As you lead out into the arm, you can see that the tensing even in the arm is present there in the sculpt, and then moving into the hands, the fingers look really good. Nice scoots down the fingers, and the nails are painted with kind of like a light gray, but they're not really that gray. Like, they're slightly sloppy in certain spots, but they don't look terrible by any means. As you move back here into the stomach region, you can see a little bit of skin detail as far as like skin wrinkling and stuff right there, kind of showing the fact that this leg is stretching out and stretching the skin there of the stomach region. More really nice scale detail and everything as you move along. You kind of have the hip bone right here, and then some nice muscle definition in the thigh for sure. You can also see the seam here where the arm is connected, as well as the leg. The leg's almost a little obscured because of the blue, but you can still see it. Still not a big deal if you ask me. Continuing to move down the leg, you've got the kneecap right there, nice calf muscle, and then a really nice foot sculpt. And again, this foot is like the tippy toes are just leaving the ground as Beta is running along, so they've shown that off very nicely, I think, in the sculpt. Nice scoots down the toes of the foot here, and you also have, again, the same coloration for the nails. You do have dew claws as well, which are pretty nice to see, even though it just totally went out of focus right there. One thing, though, that I think is very strange looking at the figure, so you've got this nice sickle claw over here, looks really good, it's up in the air, kind of like you would like to see, but then when you come over to the other sickle claw, all of a sudden that sickle claw is much smaller than we see on this side. Now, I don't know if that's something that was on Beta and I somehow missed it, but that's not something that I noticed. I'm going to have to go look back at the film and see if there was a difference between those claws and figure out why this one's so much smaller than the one here on the left foot. But the paintwork is fairly nice for both sides as far as the feet go. There is a seam back here because you have to connect the tail. Just had to push it in a little bit, but it's still quite obvious even when it's pushed in. But as you lead out the length of the tail, you have a really nice curve to the tail, kind of leaning toward the dinosaur's left, but it also goes up pretty tall before coming back down and then curving again a little bit more. If you take a look here at the opposing side, here's one area that is a little bit of a downside for the figure. First of all, the head sculpt looks great, just as nice as it looked on the initial side. The eye paint is really quite precisely placed, but the downside comes in the fact that the blue stops before the eye, but in reality the blue would have run up over the eye, out into the palate a little bit, and under the eye, just like we see on Velociraptor Blue. But unfortunately, they did not do that here on this beta version from Sega, which is definitely a little bit of a downside. I don't think it takes away from the figure much, but it's still not exactly screen accurate as far as that paintwork goes. But as you lead down here, you can see the same style of detailing like we saw on the initial side. The head doesn't have much of a major turn, a slight right turn, but nothing that's going to cause a major difference over here compared to the other side. And the same type of detail, I would say, as we continue to move along here. The arm is in a slightly different position over here, maybe a little bit further stretched forward compared to what we see on the opposing side, and the leg on this side as well obviously is quite a bit further forward compared to what we see on the opposing leg, as this leg is down planted on the ground. That leg is leaving the ground as Velociraptor Beta is continuing to move forward, obviously running towards something. Nice muscle definition moving down the entire leg over here yet again. And again, a very nice looking foot sculpt, but I'm very curious as to what's going on with that claw, and if maybe that was something in Dominion that I happen to have missed, because I definitely didn't notice it, and if that was something that was on Beta, that's a pretty interesting little touch. But as you move out here, again, you can see the nice curve in the tail. Nice looking sculpt and detail here on the underside of Beta as well. So probably, I would say, the best Beta figure that I have seen so far. And then you've also got your base, and the base doesn't sport too much detail. It's kind of smooth, more so than having a lot of texture to it. But it looks okay again for what it is, and we have the Jurassic World Dominion logo here right in the center. There's no real color variation or anything to the base, it's just a grayish tone, and that's really about it. And you've got two pegs for Beta to be propped up on. Still a pretty nice base, and with some paintwork it probably could look better, but the texturing isn't really all that great on the base regardless, so I don't know how much better it could look with paint, but I'm sure anything added to it would make it look better than just this one flat gray that we have. Still a pretty fun base, I would say, for a really quite nice Velociraptor Beta. So I went ahead and searched up some images of Beta, and surprisingly, I believe that is exactly how the claw is. It only has like a little claw over here on the right foot, and I never noticed that before, so that's actually a pretty neat little detail that I wish I had noticed prior, but still pretty cool, you know, even for the makers of Dominion to include such a random little detail like that. That's definitely neat. But as far as a size goes, and that little detail being captured by the Sega version means that this is definitely the most screen accurate version I've seen. But as far as a length, and this does not want to measure very well because the tail's in kind of a weird spot, there, we'll do it that way. You're looking at about 7¼ inches or around 18½ centimeters. And then for a height, clearly the highest point is going to be the tail. I'd say about 4¾ inches or a little over 12 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Velociraptor Beta figure, and you can definitely see that even for being a Beta figure, it has a really nice size, much larger than any other Beta I've seen outside of like the Rowdy Roars version and the animatronic type version that we've had, but this is definitely a very nicely sized version of Velociraptor Beta and quite a bit larger than Mattel's version. And to show you that, there is the Mattel version leaning on the Sega version because it doesn't want to stand at this point in time, but you can see that there is a massive size difference between the two and also a massive difference when it comes to screen accuracy, as the Sega version is far more screen accurate than the version that Mattel has given us, which is definitely a plus for the Sega version, and you don't realize just how off looking the Mattel version is until you see it with a more screen accurate version like this Sega version. So very interesting to take notice of the fact that, again, it is quite different. And then, even though it's not currently on its base, we have the Sega version of Velociraptor Blue that came out during Fallen Kingdom next to our Sega version of Velociraptor Beta for, obviously, Jurassic World Dominion. And I would say that there's obviously no scale here between the two. There definitely is not meant to be. They do look pretty cool together, that's for sure. I think the paintwork looks a little nicer on Beta compared to Blue, just when it comes to the tone of color, but also the blue stripe somehow looks even better on Beta, but the Beta version still doesn't look that great as far as that blue stripe goes. But still pretty cool, again, for sure, to see the two together here and to give you a better idea of how they look, you know, a little bit further apart. We've got a really, really nice version of Velociraptor Blue from Sega, but an equally as beautiful version, I would say, of Beta as well. And then for another size comparison, we have the recent Sega Giganotosaurus that I reviewed next to Beta, and you can again see that there's definitely no size difference, as the Giganotosaurus would be gigantic next to Beta, and that's not the case. They're a fairly similar size. The Giga's a little bit bigger, I would say, but still pretty similar in size overall. And then for one final size comparison, here is a Mattel Velociraptor next to Velociraptor Beta from Sega, and you can clearly see that the Beta version here is a bit larger than our Mattel Velociraptor. Not a lot bigger, but definitely a little bit bigger, which also helps to, again, increase, in my opinion, the appeal factor of this Beta figure, having, again, a pretty decent size to it compared to others that have come before it, and even the Mattel Velociraptor itself. So this really cool brand new Velociraptor Beta figure from Sega is definitely another really fun release in their line. This is one of 3 brand new Jurassic World Dominion figures from them that I know of. I don't know that there's any others, but it's another really cool one, and I think it was a pretty nice choice because Beta hasn't really gotten much love for the film, which is surprising because Beta is pretty adorable in the film and also has had quite a few fairly decent scenes through the film, and not to mention a lot of popularity as far as like the promotional work for Dominion. So it's surprising to see that Beta hasn't had so many figures, but this is definitely the best Beta figure that I've seen so far. The sculpt, again, is extremely screen accurate as far as I can tell. I think it looks pretty much exactly as Beta looks in the film, and that's one thing that Sega has always been really good at, and that's capturing the likeness of the dinosaurs that they see on screen. And I really wish they'd release more figures because they honestly, again, create some fantastic figures sculpt-wise. As far as screen accuracy, the general appearance, and the fine detail, it is definitely some of the best Jurassic figures that I've seen anywhere when it comes to these Sega versions, and that's exactly the case for this beta. I think the fact that it's kind of running off of a ledge as well looks really neat, and definitely is another extremely appealing aspect to this release. I really quite love the fact that it's kind of running off of that little ledge there, that little mountainous area, and it just is such a very unique pose that I don't see often portrayed in dinosaurs like that, in dinosaur models. So that's a huge plus as well. And again, the detail is extremely vibrant and highly detailed throughout the entire figure, and I'm really impressed that they even captured that kind of tiny claw on the right foot, which till this video, I had no idea was a thing. So I'm glad that I was able to notice that here, thanks to Sega picking up every detail that they can. The paintwork, even though it's not the greatest, and it never usually is when it comes to these Sega figures, is pretty okay, I guess. They just didn't capture the blue stripe in the way it appears perfectly as far as like going up and around the eye on the right side of Beta, and the overall appearance to it, although not looking terrible, just doesn't look great. But considering this is kind of like a mass-produced toy type figure, it's not surprising that it doesn't look extremely highly detailed, and this is pretty much exactly as I expected it to look. So these figures, the paint never really is that great on them, but they are perfect candidates when it comes to repainting. And I also like the fact that it's pretty sizable, which is a huge plus for a beta figure as well. Not massive by any means, but definitely bigger than most betas that we've seen up until this point. So if you are interested in picking this up, again, these figures are a little bit tricky to find, especially for a decent price. eBay prices are kind of like through the roof most times every time I see them on there. So my suggestion is to go the route that I went, and that's contact Brett, who is a member of the Dino Toy Forum, who is pretty much doing a massive favor to collectors of dinosaurs everywhere, and that is helping you to get a hold of different figures from Japan at a much cheaper rate than you're going to find anywhere else. So I will include a link in the description of the video to his email address, where you can send him an email and then let him know basically what figures you would like to get a hold of, and then he'll search them out for you, help to get you a price for them. And on top of that, he has a really cool kind of like mailing list where he'll send out emails constantly to let you know what dinosaur lots and different dinosaur figures and stuff that he's found recently that you could probably pick up from Japan. And he has this really cool thing that he does where he kind of bundles the orders and stuff up and then ships them every few months if that's the way you'd like to go, because it saves you drastically on shipping, making the figures even cheaper. So again, make sure you contact Brett and Wes and let them know what figures you would like. Let them know you'd like to be a part of their mailing list and get in on the incredible offers that they have been supplying us in the collecting community with for quite some time. Grab yourself this Velociraptor Beta along with pretty much any other dinosaur figure that is released in Japan at a much cheaper rate than you're going to find pretty much anywhere else. And make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.